In 1983, Gene Simmons met Shannon Tweed at the Playboy Mansion. It took him 28 years to marry her, but their 2011 wedding wasn't about love. It was about covering up a scandal that almost destroyed his family. Recently discovered footage from their reality show reveals conversations that were never meant to be public. His son was caught in a plagiarism scandal. Legal documents from 2025 mention incidents involving female employees. The man who claimed to have slept with 4,800 women is now facing consequences that go far beyond his wild reputation. Gene Simmons wasn't always Gene Simmons. He was born as Kaym Witz on August 25 of 1949 in Haifa, Israel. His mother, Flora Klein, had just survived hell. She was born in Hungary in 1925 and had barely escaped the Nazi concentration camps. His father, Ferenc Yohiel Witz, also escaped Hungary and married Flora in 1946. They moved to Israel in 1947, just before the state was born, with British forces still blocking the way. Their past was full of pain, and that pain quietly echoed through everything Kaym would become. By the time he turned 6 in 1955, things got worse. His parents' marriage broke apart mostly because they didn't have money. His father stayed in Israel. His mother raised him alone in Tirat Carmel. She worked nearly every day in factories sewing buttons just to feed them. Sometimes they only had bread and milk for dinner. At age 7, Kaym was already trying to help. He picked wild fruit with a friend and sold it by the roadside. He knew what struggle meant. He made his first winter coat out of an army blanket. The cold didn't care, but he had no other choice. His mother worked until late at night, and he often cried himself to sleep in an empty house. At school, it didn't get any easier. Other kids bullied him for being different. Even in post-war Israel, some of the hate his mother had escaped followed him into the classroom. But something else found him too. Comic books, American ones, Spider-Man, Superman, they became his escape. He couldn't even read English yet, but he tried anyway. By age 7, he was already speaking Hebrew, Hungarian, and Turkish. And now he was secretly picking up English too, all because he wanted to understand the heroes in those comics. In a world still healing from war, where food was limited and hope felt rare, those stories gave him something to hold on to. His mother didn't talk much about what she'd been through, but the pain was always there. By 1957, Kaym had started to see it more clearly. She had been just 14 when the Nazis forced her into labor picking potatoes in fields while soldiers watched with guns. She wore clothes marked with crosses, moving between camps, watching her world vanish one relative at a time. She didn't need to explain it with words. Kaym je razumio njezinu šutnju, pretjeranu zaštitničku nastrojenost i način na koji je ponekad plakala bez razloga. To je u njemu ostavilo nešto, potrebu da se nikada ne osjeća slabo, da nikada ne dopusti nikome da ga vidi slomljenog. Iste te godine, 1957, Flora je donijela odluku koja će sve promijeniti. Jedva preuzevši ikakvo ime, ona i 8-godišnji Kaym napustili su Izrael. Stigli su u Queens u New Yorku bez novca, bez znanja engleskog jezika i bez obitelji koja ih je čekala. Njegov otac je ostao, ponovno se oženio i započeo novi život. Kaym ga više nikada nije vidio. Postao je Eugene Klein i počeo ispočetka. WC školjke s ispiranjem i večere s televizije su ga zadivljavale, ali prilagodba nije bila laka. Flora je radila duge sate u tvornicama u Brooklynu, ponekad i 15 sati dnevno. Gene se morao brinuti o sebi uz pomoć dadilja i naučiti pravila čudnog novog svijeta. Neko je vrijeme išao u židovsku školu, ali se nije uklopio. Zatim je prešao u javnu školu. Maturirao je u srednjoj školi Newtown 1967. godine. Isprva su ga djeca zadirkivala zbog načina na koji je govorio. Njegov naglasak tjerao ga je da se osjeća kao stranac gdje god je išao, ali nije dopustio da ga to slomi. Prodavao je kaktuse od vrata do vrata. Ponovno je brao voće baš kao što je to činio u Izraelu. Svaka uvreda, svako odbijanje tjeralo ga je da se više trudi. Počeo je brže učiti engleski gledajući televiziju i čitajući više stripova. Tada je eksplodirala njegova obsesija pop kulturom. Do 1959. Sa samo 9 godina ponovno je službeno promijenio ime, ovaj put u Gene Klein. Ime Gene odabrao je po kaubojskim glumcima poput Genea Autryja. Sada je bio potpuno odlučan biti Amerikanac, čak i ako je još uvijek živio u skučenom stanu s majkom i rođacima. Zaljubio se u televiziju, posebno u Ed Sullivan Show. Kad su se Beatlesi pojavili 9. veljače 1964, nešto u njemu se probudilo. Želio je taj život. Želio je pozornicu slavu. Želio se osjećati kao netko, ali iznutra se i dalje osjećao kao dječak bez ičega. Ponekad se čak pretvarao da je Britanac kopirajući naglaske Beatlesa samo da bi se uklopio. Djevojkama se to sviđalo. Bio je nespretan, nesiguran, prolazio je kroz neuredne promjene tinejdžerskog doba, ali njegov šarm je polako rastao. Tijekom 1960-ih Gene je prihvaćao svaki posao koji je mogao pronaći. Radio je u mesnicama rezeći meso. Radio je u delikatesnim trgovinama iza pulta. Zarađivao je samo $1,025 na sat, ali je štedio svaki cent. Siromaštvo ga je naučilo da broji svaki cent. Klonio se alkohola čak i na zabavama. Primjećivao je kako se stariji dečki opijaju i postaju nemarni. Ostajao je oštar. Tako je osvajao cure. Sam je to rekao. Koristio je svoju jasnoću dok su svi ostali izgubili svoju. Počeo je učiti svirati gitaru neprestano vježbajući. Nakon što je vidio Beatlese na televiziji nije mogao prestati. Osnivao je male bendove i počeo graditi svoju budućnost još dok je bio u školi. Godine 1968 upisao se na Sullivan County Community College. Studirao je pedagogiju, stekao je preddiplomsku diplomu do 1970, pa čak i predavao 6. razred u španjolskom Harlemu za $75 tjedno, ali njegovo srce nije bilo u učionici. Pridružio se Paulu Stanleyu i osnovao band pod nazivom Rainbow, koji je ubrzo 1970 postao Wicked Lester. Svirali su u klubovima navečer, a danju radili druge poslove. Gene je čak radio u modnom časopisu. Također je radio prevoditeljske poslove koristeći mađarski, turski i španjolski koje je naučio kao dijete od dadilja i susjeda. Ali glazba je bila mjesto gdje je živjela njegova duša. Isprobavao je različite zvukove, čak je snimio i neke solo pjesme pod svojim imenom. Sve vrijeme je slao novac svojoj majci, još uvijek noseći teret njezina preživljavanja i svega što je izgubila 1945 godine. A onda je tu bio dio njegove priče koji je šokirao čak i njegove obožavatelje. Gene Simmons kaže da je izgubio nevinost s gotovo 14 godina 1963. Bio je samo dijete na novinskoj ruti. Jedne zimske večeri neposredno prije Božića pokucao je na vrata mušterije. Odgovorila je plačući odjevena samo u tanku spavačicu. Bila je udana žena. Što se sljedeće dogodilo kasnije je detaljno opisao u svojoj knjizi. Nije to bio samo početak njegovog seksualnog života. Godine 1970. Gene Simmons udružio se s Paulom Stanleyem, zajedno sa Stevom Coronellom, Brooke Ostrander i Tonyjem Zarellom osnovali su band pod nazivom Wicked Lester. Zvuk je bio čudna mješavina folka i rocka rođena na nepredvidljivoj glazbenoj sceni New Yorka. Do 15. listopada 1972 snimili su cijeli album u Electric Lady Studiosu, koji je izgradio Jimi Hendrix. Epic Records je mnogo platio da se to dogodi, ali njihov A&R direktor Don Ellis to je apsolutno mrzio. Nazvao je zvuk previše neurednim i previše čudnim za radio, pa ga je zauvijek odložio. To odbijanje teško je pogodilo Genea. Uložio je cijeli svoj trud u projekt, a sada je bio mrtav prije nego što je uopće započeo. Biasni Gene i Paul otpustili su Steva Coronella, na kratko doveli Rona LeJacka, a zatim potpuno ugasili Wicked Lester. Ali to nije bio kraj. Nakon što je Kiss postao poznat, Gene i Paul platili su $138,000 1977. Kako bi otkupili stare snimke Wicked Lestera samo kako bi bili sigurni da nikada neće biti objavljene. Bojali su se da će stari zvuk uništiti oštru sliku koju su sada gradili. Ipak kasnije su na internet procurili bootlegovi otkrivajući pjesme poput She, Love Her All I Can, koje će Kiss kasnije ponovno snimiti bez navođenja originalne postave. Taj neuspjeli bend iznjedrio je nešto veće. Do siječnja 1973, Gene i Paul su završili s kompromisom. Pronašli su oglas za Rolling Stone koji je postavio Peter Criss, iskusni bubnjar iz bendova poput Lipsa i Chelsea. Brzo se pridružio. Zatim su pronašli Asa Fraleya preko reklame u Village Voice-u. Zajedno su njih četvorica stvorili nešto potpuno novo. Ovo nije trebao biti običan rock band. It was going to be a wild, over-the-top show with makeup, fire, and fantasy. Inspired by the shock rock of Alice Cooper and the glam style of New York Dolls, they launched Kiss. Their first show took place on January 31, 1973 at a small club in Queens called the Coventry, which used to be called the Popcorn Club. Only 3 people showed up, some of them girlfriends of the band. But that night, Gene breathed fire on stage for the first time. It was a spectacle nobody forgot. Without a single hit song or any airtime on MTV, they built a following. Word spread through fan magazines and live shows, not through the radio. Within 18 months, they were headlining Anaheim Stadium in 1974. Gene later said their makeup was so strange and unforgettable that it just stuck in people's minds. It was raw, it was weird, and it was spreading. In 1973, Gene created the Demon. Inspired by horror films like Black Sabbath and comic book characters like Black Bolt, he painted bat wings around his eyes and started breathing fire and spitting blood on stage. He had learned the tricks from a professional. When the band first started experimenting with makeup, they had no real plan. Gene went for horror. Peter drew whiskers on his face like a cat. Ace made himself into a space alien. They stood in front of mirrors painting wildly, trying to make something nobody had seen before. Their early shows barely drew a dozen people. At the Coventry, crowds ranged from 10 to 15, sometimes fewer. But those few people left talking. Even before the internet kids were spreading the word, Gene said it felt sticky and strange, but it was working. That makeup and fire and blood turned frustration into fascination. They didn't need a radio hit, they just needed to be unforgettable. In August 1973, a man named Bill Alcoin saw Kiss play at the Hotel Diplomat. He believed in them so much that he promised to get them a record deal within 2 weeks, and he did. By November 1, they had signed with Casablanca Records, a brand new label run by Neil Bogart. Peter Criss was so excited when he heard the news that he literally fell off his platform heels. The band quickly recorded their first album with help from producer Eddie Kramer. It was released on February 18, 1974. Sales were slow at first, only 75,000 copies, but the band didn't stop. They played over 300 shows that year. Casablanca Records was nearly bankrupt, but Kiss's constant touring kept them alive. Neil Bogart doubted their makeup gimmick at first, but when he saw the crowds growing, he knew it was working. By 1975, they were filling stadiums all without a single major radio hit. Gene called it a gamble that turned them into legends. During those early years, Gene developed a strange habit. He began taking Polaroid photos of his sexual encounters. Each woman had to hold up the hotel key as proof. Over the years, he claimed to have taken nearly 5,000 of these photos, boasting in interviews that he had slept with more than 4,600 women. He even showed the photos to friends and guests. Grace Slick from Jefferson Airplane called it disgusting. Gene kept them all locked in a box. His wife Shannon Tweed found them after their 2011 marriage and burned them live on their reality show, ending that chapter of his life. While Gene never touched drugs, his sex addiction became part of his wild on-stage persona. From small clubs to massive stadiums, he turned chaos into a performance and into power. Everything changed on September 10, 1975. That's when they released the live album Alive. It was loud, unfiltered, and filled with the madness of their shows. You could hear the fire, the screams, and the blood in every track. Songs were recorded in places like Detroit, Cleveland Wildwood, and Davenport throughout that year. On May 16, June 21, St. July 20 and July 23 the album went quadruple platinum, selling over 4 million copies. It reached number 9 on the Billboard charts and stayed there for 110 weeks. That record saved Casablanca from going under. There was even a lawsuit against Neil Bogart at the time, and Kiss's success pulled the label back from the edge. The album title Alive was a nod to Slade's 1972 live album, which had inspired them. It was proof that the makeup, the fire, the madness, it all worked. Suddenly they weren't just a strange band, they were the future of rock. In 1976, they pushed further. Destroyer came out on March 15 with producer Bob Ezrin at the helm. He added strings. A choir of children, reverse drum sounds, and sound effects shouted out loud hit number 31 on the Billboard Hot 100. Gene's song God of Thunder was filled with screams and darkness, but Ezrin didn't make it easy. When the band gave him 15 demo tracks in August 1975, he threw out almost all of them. He rewrote their songs, rearranged the music, and even played the bass himself on Detroit Rock City. Some tracks stole ideas from classical music, like Beethoven's Sonata Pathétique sampled for Great Expectations. Rehearsals began in August 1975 during a break in the Alive tour, and recording sessions continued at Electric Lady Studios through September and January. Gene's ego grew with each success, and while Ezrin polished the sound, Gene made sure his own persona stayed front and center. By the late 1970s, the tours became more than just concerts. They were full-blown spectacles. The Dynasty Tour in 1979 ran from June 15th to December 16th, with Gene flying across the stage and Ace Frehley's guitar shooting rockets at smoke-spewing props. Their technician, John Elder Robeson, created these jaw-dropping effects. They played 92 shows across North America, but cracks were showing. Some venues were too empty, like the canceled Pontiac Silverdome shows or the downsized Los Angeles gigs. Peter Criss was struggling. His drug use got worse. He started sabotaging shows, stopping drumming mid-performance just to lash out. Gene called it self-destruction. By the final show in Toledo on December 16, that's 1979, it was clear the original band was falling apart. Fans felt the shift and disco had crept into their sound. Families started coming to shows instead of hardcore rock fans. Gene kept flying, but the band was coming down fast, and in 1978, everything got stranger. NBC aired a bizarre TV movie called Kiss Meets the Phantom of the Park on October 28th. It was produced by Hanna-Barbera, the same people behind Scooby-Doo. Kiss played themselves superheroes battling an evil inventor in a theme park. Gene improvised lines about world domination, echoing his real-life plan to turn Kiss into a global brand. The acting was terrible and fans hated it. Gene loved the attention, but the rest of the band tried to pretend it never happened. The movie was so embarrassing that people on set were banned from bringing it up. Still, it became a cult classic, especially in Europe, where it was renamed Attack of the Phantoms. The project proved that Gene's ego wasn't just big, it was unstoppable. That same year, all four members released solo albums on September 18th. Gene's record outsold some of Kiss's actual group albums. It included strange covers like When You Wish Upon a Star and guest appearances from Cher and Bob Seger. His songs talked about radioactivity and twisted fantasies. Meanwhile, Kiss released Dynasty on May 23, RD 1979 with I Was Made for Loving You, reaching number 11 on the Billboard charts. It sold over 1 million copies and went platinum in 5 countries, but the disco influence hurt their image. Rock fans walked away and ticket sales collapsed. Venues shrank. The magic was fading. Peter Criss played drums on only one track before quitting for good. The cracks had become splits. On September 18, the 1983 Kiss did the unthinkable. They took off their makeup live on MTV. After 10 years of mystery, they revealed their real faces. At the same time, they released Lick It Up, which went platinum with over 1 million copies sold. The sound was heavier, raw, more aggressive. The gamble worked. Sales jumped and fans came back. Gene saw it as a rebirth. By then, Kiss had over 100 licensed products, from action figures to lunchboxes, making millions in merch. The masks were gone. The business was booming. In 1984, Gene took a break from music and stepped into Hollywood. He played the villain Luther in the sci-fi thriller Runaway, directed by Michael Crichton. He was a mad scientist who used killer robots to murder people. Drawing from his demon character, Gene delivered lines with dramatic flair and died at the hands of his own creation. Meanwhile, back in the band, Peter Criss had been fired in 1980 after his addiction got out of control. Gene called it a necessary amputation. Eric Carr stepped in as the new drummer known as the Fox. It was a painful loss, but it helped them start fresh. In 1989, Kiss released Hot in the Shade, with the ballad Forever hitting number 8 on the Billboard Hot 100. It sold over 500,000 copies and became their biggest hit in the no-makeup years. But the sound was soft, more romantic than rebellious. Fans were confused, but the sales said otherwise. Behind the scenes, Gene was still chasing women. His affairs disrupted the band's work. He missed sessions. He picked Hollywood over rehearsals. Eric Carr sang his first lead vocal on Little Caesar, but it would be his last album before his death in 1991. Gene's distractions nearly tore everything apart. In his 2001 autobiography, Kiss and Makeup, Gene revealed the full truth. He had slept with over 4,800 women during his time in the band. One of the wildest stories came from the late 70s. He was dating Cher between 1979 and 1980, but ended up falling for her best friend Diana Ross. It started with a simple Christmas shopping trip and turned into a full-blown love triangle. Cher never forgave them. The scandal blew up in People magazine, and it became one of the most famous betrayals in rock history. Gene stayed friends with both women, but the damage was permanent. Then came the biggest twist of all. In 1996, the original members of Kiss reunited. The makeup returned. The shows sold out everywhere. They performed in 75 cities, played 92 shows, and sold 1.2 million tickets. The tour made $143 million. But behind the scenes, things were tense. Fraley and Criss were paid flat rates of $80,000 per show, while Gene and Paul took $110,000 plus profits. Lawsuits followed. Old wounds reopened. The The success was real, but so were the problems. Even as they broke records, they were breaking apart again. From 2006 to 2012, Gene Simmons let cameras follow him in a reality show called Gene Simmons' Family Jewels. It gave fans a front-row seat into his home life with his longtime partner Shannon Tweed and their two children, Nick and Sophie. The show ran for 7 seasons and became A&E's second biggest hit after Dog the Bounty Hunter. While the series painted a picture of a softer, more family-focused Simmons, it left out most of his wild past. Then in 2008, a sex tape surfaced, showing him with another woman. He took legal action, calling it a violation of privacy. But the biggest twist came in 2011 when, after 28 years of avoiding it, Gene finally married Shannon. The wedding made headlines. Some viewers criticized the show for staging over-the-top moments, including a fake deal to buy an Australian football team. But it still managed to humanize a man once known only for makeup and mayhem. Gene's business empire kept growing. By the 2000s, he had slapped a KISS logo onto over 5,000 products. You could find it on everything from pinball machines to condoms to even coffins. The brand was everywhere. Sales topped $1 billion. But then, in 2017, he went one step too far. Gene tried to trademark the famous devil horns hand gesture, claiming he invented it back in 1974. His filing described it as a pose with the index and pinky fingers up and thumb out, similar to the American Sign Language sign for I love you. The backlash was instant. Metal fans were furious. Critics reminded him that people like John Lennon and Ronnie James Dio had been using the gesture long before KISS. Just days later, Gene dropped the attempt. But the stunt made it clear how far he was willing to go for control. Trouble followed him into other areas too. In 2010, Gene was sued by ESPN makeup artist Victoria Jackson, who claimed he behaved inappropriately during a 2009 SportsCenter appearance while in full costume. She said he hugged and humped her. Gene denied it, saying his metal codpiece made that impossible. He even filed a countersuit to clear his name. The case was eventually settled, but that wasn't the only time he faced legal trouble. In 2016, a dishwasher at his Rock and Brews restaurant accused him of groping her. Another woman made a similar claim in 2017. Both cases were quietly resolved by 2018. Though he often dismissed these lawsuits as baseless, they added up and hinted at a troubling pattern. Despite everything, his fortune continued to grow. By 2015, Gene Simmons was worth more than $400 million. That didn't just come from music. It came from the mountains of KISS merch. Over 100 million albums sold and non-stop tours. In 2012, he and Paul Stanley launched a restaurant chain called Rock and Brews, which grew to multiple locations. He also got involved in unusual ventures like The Vault, a $2,000 compilation of rare recordings released in 2017. And in 2018, he joined a cannabis company called Invictus MD as Chief Evangelist Officer. He bought into the LA KISS Arena football team in 2013, which folded after a few years. And by 2025, his solo tour alone brought in 6 figures per show without even needing the full KISS setup. His relationship with Shannon Tweed began in 1983 at the Playboy Mansion. Shannon, who had been named Playmate of the Year in 1982, entered Gene's world knowing he had a reputation. He claimed nearly 5,000 lovers by 2002, but they still built a life together. Their son Nick was born in 1989 and their daughter Sophie in 1992. Gene would joke that marriage was a trap, quoting Groucho Marx, but his behavior eventually pushed Shannon too far. In 2011, she stormed off the Joy Behar show, calling him a pig. Later that year, she found his collection of explicit Polaroids and burned them on air. That moment shocked fans, but something changed. Gene proposed to her in Belize on July 26, 2011, and they got married on October 1, St. Cole. In Mataz. Nick was a groomsman, and Sophie the maid of honor. It was emotional and unexpected, especially after 28 years of resisting. Their reality show didn't hide the tension. The turning point came in season 6, after a photo of Gene with 2 models at a Santa Monica event in 2009 caused Shannon to temporarily walk out. The show followed them into therapy, where she said she never agreed to be in an open relationship and felt blindsided. Gene finally opened up, admitting he had deep fears of commitment because of his childhood. The moment he asked her to marry him caught everyone off guard. The show ran for 167 episodes and pulled back the curtain on more than just their relationship. It showed the pain and pressure behind the fame. In 2018, Gene's tough guy image cracked. His mother, Flora Klein, passed away on December 5 at the age of 93. She was a Holocaust survivor who had endured the horrors of Nazi camps and lost her own mother in a gas chamber. After immigrating to Israel and then to New York in 1958, she raised Gene alone. He always credited her with shaping his values. Her death shook him. On Instagram, he called her his moral compass and urged people to cherish their mothers. His wife Shannon called her the best grandmother, and Paul Stanley described her as fiercely loving. For once, fans saw Gene without the mask. Even his children weren't spared the spotlight. In 2010, his son Nick got into trouble over his comic book Incarnate, which was accused of plagiarizing the Japanese manga Bleach. Fans showed exact panel comparisons and demanded accountability. The publisher pulled the comic and Nick apologized, saying it was meant as homage, but the backlash didn't go away. Critics said the artwork was amateur and the copying too obvious. Gene defended his son, but the incident damaged Nick's credibility as a creator and followed him onto their reality show. Gene's habit of saying exactly what he thinks sparked more trouble in 2024. On October 8th, during a guest appearance on Dancing with the Stars, he made comments about female dancers that many called creepy. Instead of focusing on their performances, he kept talking about how beautiful they looked. One comment about Chandler Kinney fogging up his glasses went viral for all the wrong reasons. Social media erupted, calling him the gross uncle, and people demanded ABC apologize. Gene didn't back down. In an October 10th interview, he said he stood by every word. Then came the fan package in April 2025. For $12,495, not including the ticket, fans could join the ultimate Gene Simmons experience, where they'd act as his roadie for a day. They'd get to help with soundcheck, eat backstage, and even be introduced on stage, plus receive a signed bass guitar. Critics tore it apart, calling it shameless and tone-deaf, especially during tough economic times. But the package sold out. One fan, a retired soldier, paid for the experience and said it was worth every penny. Still, the stunt reignited debates over celebrity greed, especially considering Gene's wealth. The controversy didn't stop there. On August 13, 2025, President Trump announced that Kiss would receive the Kennedy Center honors. Fans were confused. Just 3 years earlier, Gene had blasted Trump in interviews, calling him abhorrent for spreading hate. After January 6th, he even compared Trump's rise to cockroaches coming out of the walls. But now the band was accepting an award from him. The internet exploded with memes and accusations of hypocrisy. Simmons didn't comment, but the silence said a lot. In 2025, Simmons also took his solo act on the road again. At the Sturgis Motorcycle Rally on August 3 RD, he performed without the usual Kiss armor, telling stories from his 50-year career. But not everyone was happy. Some tickets cost over $500, and the VIP package rubbed people the wrong way. By March 23 RD, several dates were canceled due to low sales. Fans felt he had gone too far, prioritizing profit over the fans who made him. Still, Gene insisted things were easier now without the giant Kiss setup. When Ozzy Osbourne died on July 23 2025, Gene broke down during an interview on CBS Mornings. He remembered how Kiss opened for Black Sabbath in 1975 and spoke about Ozzy as a genuine ego-free soul. He even revealed that Kiss once turned down a tour with Sabbath in the 70s because of their heavy drug use. Simmons wanted to keep his band's image clean. That detail stunned fans. For all his shock value and wild image, Gene Simmons had always kept a tight grip on control.